Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Saturday, February 24th, 2024. This is the Excerpt. Today, it's been 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Plus, President Joe Biden gets some bad approval rating news, and we look at the latest from the decision on whether or not to disqualify Fani Willis from Trump's Georgia election fraud case. Today marks the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 2 years into its struggle, Ukraine fights on, but some experts warn that the future could be bleak for the country of 40 million people, millions of whom have been displaced around Ukraine and the world. Mary Kate Schneider, director of global studies at Loyola University, Maryland, told USA Today, quote, "Russia is playing the long game, and Ukraine is fighting for its continued existence. This is a war of attrition that will not end anytime soon," unquote. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, is calling on the international community to stand with Ukraine.
Just as Putin is hoping Ukrainian resolve will fade, he is counting on ours to dissipate as well. And so the task before us is clear. 10 years since this campaign began, and 2 years since Russia's full-scale invasion, we must continue to stand with Ukraine and stand up for international order.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has announced new sanctions on more than 500 Russian targets in the wake of the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. It's the largest round of financial penalties on Russia since President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022. The sanctions take aim at Russia's financial sector, military-industrial complex, procurement networks, and take aim at sanctions evaders across multiple continents. The U.S. also imposed sanctions on 3 Russian government officials connected to Navalny's imprisonment. Navalny died earlier this month, and Biden and others have blamed Putin for his death. Navalny's wife, Yulia Navalnaya, this week took up her late husband's mantle and called on Russians to stand with her. She now likely becomes one of the major symbols in the fight against Putin. You can read more with a link in today's show notes. President Joe Biden's approval rating fell to 38% in February, according to the latest Gallup poll out yesterday. That's just 1 percentage point away from his all-time low. The poll found that 59% disapprove of the way Biden is handling his role as president, while 2% of respondents had no opinion. Biden's latest approval rating is down 3 points from January and matches his low of 37% in surveys conducted by Gallup in April, October, and November of last year. The latest poll also found Biden's approval ratings among 5 key issues were below 50%. They are Ukraine, the economy, foreign affairs, the situation in the Middle East, and immigration. His lowest marks were on immigration, where 67% of respondents disapproved. A Georgia judge will soon decide whether to disqualify Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis and possibly her entire office in the election fraud case against former President Donald Trump and 14 others who allegedly conspired to overthrow the 2020 presidential election that Trump lost in Georgia. I caught up with USA Today domestic security correspondent Josh Meyer for the latest and a look at what happens next. Josh, thanks for hopping on.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Taylor.
So, Josh, just refresh us here. Where are we now after this month's hearings surrounding Fani Willis?
So I was in Atlanta for both of the hearings last Thursday and Friday. The judge now, Judge Scott McAfee, is taking it under advisement. He may bring everybody in for an in-camera hearing, but soon he's going to decide whether or not to disqualify Fulton County DA Fani Willis, maybe the special prosecutor Nathan Wade. There's a slight chance, although very slim, that he could conceivably disqualify the entire office for conflict of interest.
So looking at the potential outcomes here, Josh, what would happen in this case if Willis does get disqualified, and what would happen if she doesn't? What do these outcomes, these potential outcomes, look like for Trump in the case?
Well, I mean, a lot of legal experts are saying that there's a very minimal chance that she will get disqualified based on a very specific reading of the Georgia statutes, that they would really have had to file the charges and actually launch the initial investigation into Trump and the other 18 co-defendants specifically so they could keep their romantic relationship going and financially benefit from it. So I think in that sense, people are not expecting the judge to rule that way, but, you can never tell. So if the judge does rule to disqualify Fani Willis, one of the options he can have, and I think the most likely would be to refer the case to what's known as the Prosecuting Attorneys Council in Georgia. And this is a state agency where they could take it under advisement, hand it off to another county that they think has the wherewithal to do such a complex and sprawling investigation. They could conceivably refer it to the state attorney general's office. It is even possible that the attorney's council could move to try to dismiss the case. It's really uncharted waters, and we don't really know what's going to happen.
And an interesting aspect here, Josh, is it's not really just what the outcome will be, but also when we get kind of a decision here. What might the time spent on hearing evidence about the Willis-Wade affair mean for possible delays to this case, and what's next for the timeline going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the judge has set a March 1st deadline for final arguments on this disqualification issue. He is likely to hold a hearing Monday in which they talk about whether one potentially key witness is allowed to even give testimony in the case because he was the divorce lawyer for Nathan Wade and has attorney-client privilege. But the Trump campaign people that were defendants here, you got Trump, you've got Mike Roman, who initially levied these allegations against the two for having the affair. They're trying to delay the trial as far as possible into the future. And it seems like they are succeeding, at least in some respects. This has been put on hold for weeks and weeks now. And the likelihood is that it's probably going to not go to trial until after the November election, which of course is something that Trump wants.
All right, Josh Meyer, great insight as always. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks.
The Gymnastics Winter Cup is underway. The competition serves as both a qualifier for the national championships and for the men, a selection meet for the national team. All eyes will be on Suni Lee on the women's side, the reigning Olympic all-around champion who returns to competition this weekend for the first time since last year's national championships. The women's competition begins today at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Sky Blakely, a member of the U.S. gold medal winning team at the last two World Championships, also plans to compete. Meanwhile, the men's meet began yesterday and runs through tomorrow. All eyes there are on Brody Malone, the two-time U.S. champion who had not competed since early 2023. You can find a full schedule and read more about the Winter Cup with a link in today's show notes. Is the Biden's dog biter in chief? Newly released records from the Secret Service reveal the aggressive and now banished dog was involved in more biting incidents than was previously known. The records released from the Secret Service to USA Today found that the German Shepherd named Commander was involved in at least 25 biting incidents in less than a year. Most bites happened on White House grounds, while some occurred on trips to Camp David, Nantucket, and Delaware. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. Be sure to check out the Sunday edition tomorrow, hosted by Dana Taylor, and I'll be back Monday with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.